Hare Krishna, welcome back everyone to this Sravan Utsav that we started on the occasion of Krishna Janmashtami. And even after Janmashtami, because of the desires of all the devotees, we are continuing and looks like we will go at least till Radhashtami now. So today we are very, very fortunate that we have His Grace Devakinandan Prabhuji amongst all of us here for the Sravan Utsav. And my special thanks to Nitya Gopal Krishna Prabhuji for requesting Prabhuji to give lecture today. A brief introduction of Devakinandan Prabhuji. Prabhuji is a senior disciple of His Holiness Mahavishnu Goswami Maharaj, and Prabhuji has personally served Maharaj very sincerely and closely for many years. He was introduced to Krishna consciousness in 1983 at the age of 13 in Singapore through Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam, and he has been studying and speaking on Bhagavatam for many years now. In Singapore, Prabhuji oversees the management of an ISKCON center. He is also the zonal supervisor for preaching and devotional activities in Singapore. And not only that, he is a global GBC and he is a general legal counsel for ISKCON worldwide. And prior to COVID, Prabhuji also used to travel regularly to various countries around the world, including America and the Middle East, giving classes on Srimad Bhagavatam based on the instructions of his spiritual master. Prabhuji also sings very melodiously, and he sings beautiful bhajans and kirtans. So if you get opportunity, please search for his name and you will find so many wonderful bhajans and kirtans that he has sung. I have personally heard his impressive and thoughtful classes when I attended ISKCON Leadership Sangha as well as on online. Prabhuji is a lawyer by profession, and I am always amazed how he manages to do his work, manage a center, look after zonal services at Singapore level, do also the GBC services and legal counsel services at the global level, and still find time to give classes for helping all of us. As if Krishna has given him 48 hours in a day instead of 24. So with very grateful heart, let's welcome Prabhuji by loudly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare. Thank you very much, Devakinandan Prabhuji, for joining us. Over to you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Amrish Maharaj Prabhu, and thank you to all the devotees for coming together. It's so nice. Just by your chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, I can understand how much enthusiasm there is in this congregation. It's a good way to understand it. I also don't know how it is that somehow or another Krishna always makes some arrangements for living entities who are trying to take up devotional service to somehow meet, but it's really his mercy. So that's why whenever opportunities come for us to come together to hear about Krishna, the source of that opportunity, Bhagavatam tells us, is actually Krishna. Krishna is known in the 6th canto of Bhagavatam as Samanjasa. Samanjasa. So Samanjasa, if you see, it actually means the source of opportunity. So whatever opportunities that we get, especially in Krishna consciousness, that source is actually coming from Krishna. So the best way to reciprocate with that source of opportunity is to actually perform sincere and loving devotional service and take association of the devotees. The devotees and Krishna, they share a very special relationship. And that is why today's topic that Amrish Maharaj Prabhu very kindly gave us on the disappearance, or the hiding or the concealment of the calves and the gopas by Krishna, by Brahma, is really a nice chapter for us to meditate on. So let's try to remember some nice points from this chapter. The sources of this discussion today will be from Krishna Book. It will also be from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's best that way, for us to be always safely under the shelter of Srila Prabhupada. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam tato jayam mudiraye nastaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. So we hear today from the pages of Bhagavatam. Why is it that the leaders like Amrish Prabhu, why are they taking so much pains to organize these sessions? Because Bhagavatam tells us whenever we try to glorify Krishna, that becomes the perfection of our existence. In the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 12th chapter, 48. 12th canto, 12th chapter, 48th verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is a very important verse for us to keep in context so that we understand why we are doing this nice Sravan Utsav actually. Sankirtyamano Bhagavan Anantaha Shrutanubhavo Vyasanam hi pumsam Pravishya chittam Vidunoti ashesham Yata tamo arko brahm ivativataha. So Shukadev Goswami, he is now at the end of Bhagavatam in the 12th canto, 12th chapter, just one more left. And he's now telling a very important point to Parikshit Maharaj. And he tells him, my dear king, when people try to properly glorify Krishna, this is an important point. When people try to properly glorify Krishna, or if they simply hear about the power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that means we just need to do two things. We should try to glorify Krishna, or if we ourselves cannot, we should hear about the glorification. Shukadev Goswami says, if you try to do either of this, or if you do both, then something wonderful happens. Pravishya chittam vidunoti asesham. That means the Lord personally enters into the hearts of the living entities who do this. The word that is used here is personally. It is not that he sends his agent. He personally enters. And when he personally enters their hearts, what does Krishna do? He cleanses away every trace of misfortune that is found in our hearts. So Krishna is like this transcendental vacuum cleaner, He just comes into our heart, except that he is alive. Vacuum cleaners are dead. And not only is he seated in our heart, but he cleanses it personally. And all traces of misfortune that we may have in our lives, he takes away. Just like the sun, can remove darkness, and powerful winds can drive away clouds. So this is why we are studying Bhagavatam. This is why we are hearing. Because as you sit down through all these days, you can test this verse. You can test it in your life, and you will feel personally, each one of us will feel the presence of Krishna in our hearts after we have discussed Bhagavatam. Whatever traces of misfortunes that we have will go. Sometimes people ask, what are misfortunes? Bhagavatam says the greatest misfortune is forgetfulness of Krishna. That is the greatest misfortune. Not that my bank balance went down and I lost my car, or I have to downgrade from my house. That is not misfortune. That is just part of material world. But the greatest misfortune for a devotee is not to be able to remember Krishna. And Krishna takes that away. How fortunate we are. How grateful we should be to Srila Prabhupada for this. So now we try to understand this wonderful, wonderful Leela of Krishna. In this wonderful Leela, actually this Leela begins, just I think after, just after the last fight between Aghasur and Krishna. And if you remember, the boys were taken out, by Krishna's great potency, and Aghasur was killed actually. So Shukadev Goswami is speaking to Parikshit Maharaj, and he tells Parikshit Maharaj that even though these pastimes are very, very confidential, it is my duty as spiritual master to reveal these confidential pastimes to you. So he says that after the boys and the calves were taken out from the mouth of Aghasura, they came out being very happy because Krishna, was there. And despite their initial fear, they came out feeling very enthused. So when they came out like that, Krishna looked at all of them and he said, my dear friends, now that we have come out of this calamitous situation with this great demon Aghasur, just see the area around us. This river bank is so beautiful. There's so much nice vegetation. Birds are humming. It's a beautiful atmosphere. Why don't I suggest something? Let this be the best place for us to sit down and have some sporting pastimes. And since we just went through a very calamitous situation, you all must be very hungry, isn't it? Krishna is so much welfare oriented. Huh? Immediately he decided, let us all sit down. We still have our lunches. Since we are very hungry and the time has passed and it is late, let us now sit here. Don't worry about the calves, Krishna said. They can drink water from here. They can go slowly around here. Let them wander around. Let them eat the grass. So, of course, all his friends accepted Krishna's proposal. The beauty of Vrindavan residents is whatever Krishna told them, they always accepted. That is the difference why we are not in Vrindavan and they are in Vrindavan. For us to accept Krishna, so many layers of speculative knowledge and doubts and this and that must be there. But for the residents of Vrindavan, if Krishna said, let's sit down, they would sit. If Krishna said, like he said to Nanda Maharaj, drop the Indra Puja and just do Govardhan Puja, they dropped it. Because all they wanted to do was to please Krishna. This is something for us to take back actually. It's a fine but significant difference between pure devotional service and struggling devotional service. How much we are prepared to accept what Krishna says without thought, without any doubts, but on the basis of pure faith, pure love. So the friends sat down with Krishna. And Bhagavatam tells us, the description of Krishna sitting down with the friends having lunch was very wonderful. It was like a lotus flower. And in the center, the whole of the lotus flower, right, it was actually Krishna. So Krishna sat down and all the friends, they had their baskets of fruits. It was just like a transcendental picnic. So they all sat down and they began eating with Krishna. And the words Bhagavatam uses is they ate with great transcendental pleasure. Not only because the prasadam was delicious, but because the object of their love was in the center. So Bhagavatam tells us, even though all the friends were circling Krishna, every one of them, right, while they were having prasadam, they were always looking forward towards Krishna. They were hoping somehow or another to always keep looking at Krishna. They were not so much interested in prasadam. That was a byproduct. But their real satisfaction was Krishna. And that is actually prasadam. Having the mercy of the Lord, having darshan of the Lord, that is actually prasadam. And so they just, they were just enjoying their lunch because it was enhanced by the presence of Krishna. That's why in 2.9.34 of Srimad Bhagavatam, the second Chatushloka of Srimad Bhagavatam, this very nice point is given. Krishna tells Brahmaji, Rite ritam yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta charmani. Tadvidvad admano mayan yata bhaso yata tamaha. Krishna tells Brahma, anything in this world, Brahma, if you see, if it has value, it may appear to be valuable. But if it is not related to me, actually it has no value. So sitting down for a simple lunch may seem to an outsider with Krishna to be a mundane affair. But because the residents of Vrindavan, the Gopas, were sitting and Krishna was in the center, their lunch and their activity gained so much value and meaning. That is how we enhance our lives actually. Is Krishna in the center? That's the question we must ask. At every step, every activity, is Krishna in the center? If Krishna is the one in front of the zero, many, many zeros gain value. But if Krishna is not the one in front of many, many zeros, you can have 100 zeros, but factually speaking, they have no value. They have no value. So this is why all the cowherd boys became very happy. Bhagavatam is so clear about the movements of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that it even gives you the description, of how when they took out the prasadam, they had a fruit platter, they had many wonderful dishes, they put them on the rocks, on the leaves, very traditional way of eating, and they were all very, very happy to sit down with Krishna. They enjoyed their lunch with Krishna, and they all shared their food. Sometimes we are particular, you don't take mine, I don't take yours. But with Krishna, it was share and share alike. Everyone tasted each other's food. Today we call it potluck, right, Prabhu? So that's what they were doing. Transcendently, they were doing that. And they began to laugh. They forgot the terrible event of Aghasur because it didn't matter to them. Krishna was there. Now, this is a very important point. Krishna was sitting and eating all this food stuff that was offered by just ordinary personalities. Residents of Vrindavan were not Brahmanas. They were not great sages. They were not great philosophers. So as he was having this wonderful lunch with his friends, very informally, all the devatas and the denizens of heaven, they were looking at this wonderful sign of the personality of Godhead, sitting down and having this amazing food. As they looked at this scene, all of them were thinking, how is it that Krishna can be eating just plainly? Because in Shastras, Krishna is known as Yajna Book. He's known as Yajna Book. That means he only eats offerings of Yajna. In other words, he is Yajnapati. Traditionally, everyone would offer everything into the fire and then Krishna would consume. Remember the Brahmanas and their wives? The Brahmanas were doing just that actually. They were trying to invoke Krishna as Yajna Book and Yajnapati. But what did the Brahmanas' wives do? They just took the bhoga and gave it to Krishna on the side. And how come Krishna took that? Because of the loving exchange. The platform to offer Krishna anything is actually the loving exchange between devotees. That is the sacrificial fire. That is the sacrificial pit. It is not the traditional point that it must only be offered into the fire. Fire is just fire, but it is the love in which we give Krishna that's important. So everybody became very struck. How is it that Krishna, who only eats in yajna, was now eating with his friends in the forest? And while that was happening, something began to happen. The friends were engaged with Krishna. And if you remember, the calves had gone to the side deeper in the forest to drink water and to graze. As they went there, for a while, the Gopas realized they could not see the calves. Now they began to be anxious for the calves, But Krishna can actually dissipate fear, which is even fear personified. So what did Krishna do? Krishna said, don't worry, friends. Let me go and search for the calves. Don't disturb your enjoyment. See, Krishna is so considerate. He did not want anyone to wake up or get up and do something. He thought, never mind, let me go and do that. You sit down. This is quality of devotee, and this is quality of Krishna. A devotee in chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita, the quality of the devotee is that he never puts others in difficulty. This is a very important quality of devotee. And it's coming from Krishna. In all Krishna's pastimes, you never see Krishna putting others in difficulty. Never. Krishna is very accommodating. Putana wanted to pretend to be a mother, but even then he accommodated her. How many times Shishupal, chided Krishna and criticized Krishna? He accommodated him. How much he accommodates so many of us. Many, many thousands of people in this world do not even believe in Krishna. Does Krishna take away oxygen from them? Does he deny them water? Does he deny them material facilities? He doesn't do anything like that. He is so considerate. He doesn't put others in difficulty on account of their ignorance even. This is the compassion of Krishna. And this is the compassion of the great devotees. When Srila Prabhupada, used to call so many of the earlier devotees over for prasadam, they were not in the mind, to understand that they should stay back to clean up. But he never demanded that they should clean up. He did not put them into difficulty. After they left full with prasadam and happy, he cleaned up everything himself. So Krishna told them this, don't go anywhere, don't be in difficulty, don't disturb your enjoyment. But what did he do? As he went into the forest, Bhagavatam says, he didn't leave his lunch behind. He actually carried his yogurt and rice. Krishna loves his food also, So he took the lunch with him. He thought, never mind, since I'm going in, let me just move and eat, So he continued inside. Now, at that point of time, as Krishna became separated from the boys here, and as he was going to the calves, there was a moment of what we call separation, it appears, right? Because he was in the center. At that point of time, Bhagavatam tells us, Brahmā, the creator of the material universe, who resides in the higher planetary systems, who's considered one of the great personalities of this place, empowered by Krishna. He had observed, all these amazing dealings between Krishna in smiling and loving fashion. He watched how Krishna delivered all the boys from Aghasur also. And in his mind, he was astonished. That same Brahmā, Bhagavatam says, wanted to show his own power. He thought, this boy Krishna has so much power. Let me show him I also have power. Sometimes, even though we may appear to know that Krishna is supreme, pride always overtakes us at some point. This is something we always have to fight against. It's very easy from wherever we are, to think that what we are doing is actually great. And then we think that we are very, very great. And this is the danger of pride. So Brahma began to think that if Krishna has some power, let me now show him some power. He also wanted to test who this boy was, just like Indra wanted to test the power of Krishna, right? So in the same way, Brahma also did that. So when he saw Krishna's absence, Brahma did one thing. By his own mystical power, he transported the boys and he transported the calves away from the Vrindavan forest. And he took them into a cave and he kept them there. He put them under a mystical yoga nidra. Not the yoga nidra of Krishna, of course, but Brahma was sufficiently powerful. And so all the boys and calves, they were not harmed, but they just went into a deep mystical sleep. And then he thought, let me see now how Krishna disentangles himself from this situation. But Bhagavatam says, in doing that, Brahma did not realize that this was the start of his own entanglement. Because in the very near future, he would see how powerful Krishna was. So Krishna went to find the calves, and of course he could not find them. So he thought, hey, they're not there, maybe they're back. So he comes back all the way, and he finds the boys are also not there. When he finds the boys are not there, the caretaker, the calves are not there, then the cows have disappeared, he then suddenly looked around, and then immediately, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, what can you hide from him? He could understand this was the work of Brahma. Did Krishna even pause to think how he should get the boys back? Did he pause to think how he should get the calves back? Without a single pause, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just to create pleasure for himself, just to create pleasure for his devotee Brahma, who had forgotten how powerful Krishna is, just to create pleasure for the mothers and fathers of Vrindavan Dham, for the cows whose calves, had gone to graze, Krishna, the creator of the entire cosmic manifestation, decided to expand himself. How did he expand himself? He expanded himself to become calves, and he expanded himself to become the boys. Now, we must understand from Bhagavatam just how this expansion was. This expansion, Bhagavatam says, comes from the Vasudev feature of Krishna. Krishna has different potencies, and the Vasudev feature of Krishna is very, very all-pervading. He can enter into all the hearts through his Vasudev feature. So he used that Vasudev feature to start expanding. Bhagavatam says he simultaneously expanded himself into the exact number of missing cowherd boys and calves. Not one less, not one more, exact number, with exact bodily features, with the particular hands, particular limbs, with particular sticks and bugles, with their particular flutes. Each boy had their own flute, with their particular lunch bags. Can you imagine that? Talk about details. Even with their lunch bags, with the particular dresses and ornaments, and how they were placed on each boy, their names, their ages, their forms, their special activities, their natures, their characteristics. And by expanding himself this way, Krishna, who is already beautiful, he proved a very important statement from the Vedas. Samagra Jagad Vishnumayam. Samagra Jagad Vishnumayam. This is a very important aphorism that comes from the Upanishads. It also comes from the Vedas. What does it say? The all-powerful Vishnu is all-pervading. Sometimes the impersonalists think that only the impersonal feature of the Lord is pervading. But they forget that the impersonal feature of the Lord, the pervasive feature, is coming from the Vasudev feature, which is very much personal. But that they miss. And here Krishna came to establish that point, that he is very much a person. And his expansions are all very much personal. They were not clones, they were not robots. No, they were each personalities of their own. Who can do this but Krishna? And that is what Krishna did. And so the moment he expanded himself into the calves, into the cows, what did he do? At the same time, just when they had finished their lunch, he then walked back into Vrajabhumi. And all the expansions walked back with him, just like they were children. All the calves walked back also. And now this is the most beautiful part. Every day when Krishna would walk back in the evening or late afternoon, he would be embraced by Yashoda Mata. He would be embraced by Nanda Maharaj. All the residents of Vrindavan, they would come out also. And of course, they were affectionate to their children. They would embrace their children. The cows will embrace the calves. They would be very happy with their little babies. But the truth was, every resident, while embracing their sons, they would be looking at how Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mata was embracing Krishna, because their real affection was for Krishna. Their real love was for Krishna. And in their hearts, every day, they all went back home thinking, how nice it would be if we could embrace Krishna, if we could embrace Krishna. So that evening when Krishna came back, and all the calves came back, and all the boys came back, who were the boys and who were the calves? They were Krishna. They were Krishna. So something very interesting happened. Bhagavatam tells us, as the mothers of the boys heard the sounds of their flute and they came in, they rose up from their household tasks. They put everything aside. They lifted the boys onto their laps. And Bhagavatam says, after lifting them, they were surprised because milk from their breasts, which normally would not flow, just flowed spontaneously, just like milk would flow every time Yashoda Mata handled Krishna. And they were thinking, why today of all days, milk is just coming as an expression of love? Because normally this was an expression of love which was meant specific for Krishna. Bhagavatam tells us actually Krishna's energy is in everything. So he's always pleasing. But because he came today as the boys, the mothers who embraced them, they did not know it was Krishna, but they could sense that it was Krishna. You see the point? They did not know they were Krishna, but they could sense they were Krishna. That's why they took special pleasure in feeding the boys that day. The cows did the same thing too. Bhagavatam tells us, normally the cows would receive their calves, but even the cows would be looking at Krishna. How to embrace? How would a cow embrace Krishna? Difficult, but they would still be looking at Krishna. But today the milk from the others flowed for their little calves, and they embraced and smelled their calves like they never had before. This is a very important point. Sometimes people ask this question. Yes, it is important for us to always love our loved ones. But our love for our loved ones is enhanced, Bhagavatam says, when our love for Krishna is placed in the center. There is no compromise in loving our family when we love Krishna first. In fact, devotees who practice Krishna consciousness will say that our love for our family is enhanced by our love for Krishna. This is a very important concept. And why? Because Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure. We are not the reservoirs of pleasure. Krishna is the source of all pleasure. That's why he's Govinda. And it is he who gives love. It is he who gives pleasure. This very nice point, was understood through experience by Pingala. In the 11th canto, Pingala was a lady who was very beautiful. And for many years, she tried to satisfy her senses by satisfying the senses of other men. And she thought that every time other men looked at her and praised her beauty, she thought that other men were actually the source of her pleasure. But over time, when her beauty went, the men's interest in her also failed. And then she realized that all the time I was running after what I thought could bestow me happiness. But in the end, it has only given me fear, anxiety, lamentation, and illusion. That's why if you place your expectation on anything material in this world, it is definite you will be disappointed. But if you always place all our hopes and love on Krishna, Krishna will never disappoint us. This is the greatness of Krishna. So Pingala chants this beautiful verse. It's in the 11th canto, 8th chapter, 31st verse, 11:8:31. Shantam samippe ramanam rati pradam vitta pradam nityam imam vihayaha akamadam dukkha bayadi shokha moha pradam tuchamaham bhaje agnyaha. The meaning is nice. Pingala is saying, I've been such a fool all this time. I've given up the service of that original person who can give me pleasure, that person who has always been in my heart, but I ran after everybody for pleasure, forgetting that he has always been in my heart. That most dear one, he is the Lord of the universe. Only he can bestow real happiness. And he is the source of all prosperity. But what did I do? Even though he was in my heart, I completely neglected him. Instead, I served all other insignificant men. And they never could satisfy me. And even if they tried, they only brought me just the opposite. They brought me unhappiness, they brought me fear, moha, what is it? Akamadam, dukkha, bayadi, shukha. unhappiness, fear, anxiety, lamentation, and illusion. That is why the residents of Vrindavan are so happy, because even though they had families, everyone's center was Krishna. And that is why they became peaceful. The success of a congregation, the happiness of all of you working together depends on how much you put Krishna in the center. The moment you allow social intercourses to slip poisonously into a congregation in the disguise of bhakti, that social intercourse will cause disturbance. It will bring lamentation, it will bring illusion. In fact, it is Kunti Mata who says it in the first canto, 8th chapter. She says actually that the social intercourse of living entities, they are the ones that cause dissension. Very important point. So we must understand why all the residents of Vrindavan never fought, never quarreled, never had any politics with each other. Nobody was envious of each other, because while they loved their children, their husbands, their wives, they love Krishna more. And they put Krishna in the center. And because of that, their love for everybody else was put in the right perspective. This is a very important takeaway for us to remember from this Leela. So while the children, who were embraced by the mothers and fathers, their love for them increased and increased. The cows who went to see their calves in the shed, their love for them also became increased. They licked the calves' body again and again, and they profusely fed their calves, flowing with with milk from their milk bags. And so Prabhupada makes an important statement in Krishna Book. He says, in this way, the mothers, both the cows and the mothers in Vrindavan, they finally served Krishna personally. Their desire to serve Krishna was fulfilled by the Lord. What an amazing way to do that. And in that way, all the residents, they were very, very happy, not for one day, because Krishna kept his expansions going at full swing, at full height, at full intensity, at full consistency for 1 year. It's amazing. For 1 whole year. Can you imagine? How long can you and I put up an act? Maybe 1 hour, 2 hours. After that, we are finished. The reason why Krishna can go on for 1 hour is because it is not an act. It is not an act. Krishna loved the residents of Vrindavan. So when he expanded in his energy, his love for them was not to pacify them. In the meantime, let me go and find the sons and look for the calves. No. Krishna turned what looked like a liability into a supreme opportunity to actually serve the residents of Vrindavan. See, only Krishna can do this. And only the great devotees can do this. So Bhagavatam tells us, in this way, for 1 year, Krishna maintained himself by himself. He maintained everyone himself by himself. Now, one day, 5 or 6 nights before the year ends, Lord Balaram actually, looked at this, and he started thinking, what an amazing thing. Why is it every day for 1 year, these residents have loved their children even more, or just like they love Krishna? Last time it was not like that. Then Balaramji observed an interesting phenomena one day. The calves and the boys, were on an uphill. And the men who were down with their cows, they were down. And sorry, it was opposite. They were down and they were up. The cows were actually at the top of Govardhan Hill, and the men were there. And while they were there and grazing, suddenly the cows, they saw the calves. And when they saw the calves, suddenly they broke into a run. And they started running down with their tails up, with their hooves pounding and raising dust. And the men of Vrindavan became angry. They thought, why are they running? We should not be running now. They will create disturbance. And at the same time, so they started coming down also. But when they came down, they saw an amazing sight. The cows, they just could not take it. They ran to the calves and they were overwhelmed with love. And they gave milk and more milk, and licked the bodies of their children again and again and again. Now, when the men saw that, they were quite bewildered. But then when their boys also came, the men also felt great affection for the boys. This is important because before that, Bhagavatam describes the mother's love. But now it describes the father's love also. Sometimes, depending on where you grew up, fathers tend to be a little bit distant. Maybe our generation, we've become more loving. But in older generations, father was the respectful figure. I don't know about you, but every time I needed to get something from father, the petition came through the mother. It was never straight to the father. I mean, my house, the dynamics was mother was finance minister, defense minister, prime minister. Father was president. So you knew that the only way to get it was through the prime minister. But here you find, that when the men who were normally just a little bit off, little bit distant, on that day, they became like the mothers. They just started feeling this great rush of love. They experienced a great attraction for their loved ones, their little boys, and their anger disappeared. They lifted their sons, they embraced them in their arms, and they enjoyed the highest pleasure by smelling the top of their heads. It was amazing, isn't it? So Balramji was thinking, something is wrong here. Something is here. And then he thought, could it be that they are all great sages, or they're great personalities? Then he looked at Krishna and he thought, no, this must be Krishna. It's only Krishna. And then Balaram thought, even I, who's the first expansion of the Lord, cannot understand the greatness of the Lord. You know what a significant statement that is from Balramji? Even Balramji, the reservoir of all strength, cannot understand Krishna. How can any one of us even understand Krishna? It's a very important point. So then Krishna and Balaram inquired, and Krishna shared with him, no, this is the reason why it has happened. And Balaram understood it then. So almost 1 year had come. And that was only a moment in Brahma's time, isn't it? You all know Brahma's time is so long. And for him, he just went off. And as far as he was concerned, he thought, I'll just come back a moment later and see what's happening. But it was 1 year. It was 1 year. So when Brahma came back, he thought, okay, fine. A complete year has passed. Let's see, for the Vrindavan residents, I'd like to see what has happened now. Just like Indra thought that, the residents of Vrindavan would be in difficulty when the rains came, Brahma thought, oh, Krishna must have been scrambling to find out where I've kept the calves and the boys. And what would Krishna do to satisfy all the residents? So as Brahma came into Vrindavan, he expected some calamity, but everyone was peaceful, everyone was happy, everyone was moving around. Then he looked at the boys and the calves and he said, wait a minute, these are the same boys and the same calves that I had put under my mystic potency. How come they are here? I kept them sleeping very comfortably. How is it that they are here? He counted all of them. Hey, same number of calves, same number of boys. They all look the same. How is it? Who are they? Where have they come from? And Bhagavatam tells us, Brahma began thinking for a long, long time. He began thinking the same way he was, if you remember, Brahma was meditating in the same way he began thinking. He was trying to find a solution to this. But he tried to distinguish between the two sets of boys who were each separately existing. He tried to understand who was real and who was not real. And even then he could not understand it. And that was because Bhagavatam says, Brahma wanted to mystify the all-pervading Krishna. But Krishna can never be mystified. But on the contrary, Krishna mystified Brahma as he mystifies the entire universe. And this is the second point we must take back today. No amount of material, speculative knowledge or potency can make us understand Krishna. This is a very important point. And this is affirmatively stated by Daksha, the Prajapati, in the 6th canto, 4th chapter, 29th verse, 6:4-29. Very important verse for preaching. Yadya niruptam vachasa nirupitam diyakshabirya manasotayasya ma bhut swarupam gunarupam hi tattat savai gunapaya visharga lakshanaha. This is very important. Daksha tells the Supreme Personality of Godhead in 6:4-29, my Lord, these things have nothing to do with you. The first thing that has nothing to do with Krishna, anything that you express with material vibration, it has nothing to do with Krishna. If there is no Krishna, that vibration is material. Anything that you try to ascertain using your material intelligence has nothing to do with Krishna. Anything that you experience by your material senses, you think it is complete, it is perfect, but it has nothing to do with Krishna. Anything that we concoct within this material mind has also nothing to do with Krishna, because they are all effects of the material nature. This is a very important point for us to realize. Sometimes, we try very hard to find solutions to material problems in this world using just our material knowledge and skill. But we don't realize until we invoke the transcendental potency of Krishna. Transcendental intelligence is worlds apart from material intelligence. Always we must remember that point. And that is what was being taught to Brahma. He was the greatest being in this entire material universe. But even after thinking so much, he could not understand. He could not understand. Then as Brahma looked on more carefully at the cows and the calves and Krishna, he saw an amazing sight. Every cow and every calf and every boy in Brahma's eyes began the transformation of personalities who looked exactly identical to Vishnu. In fact, they were all Vishnus. Every single boy and calf transformed in the presence of Brahma's eyes into four-armed bluish personalities, holding conch shell, disc, mace, lotus, flower in their hands. They had beautiful yellowish silken gold garments. They wore beautiful garlands of forest flowers around their necks. They had the emblem, Sri Vatsava, emblem of the goddess of fortune. Their necks, were marked with the 3 lines like you would see on the conch shell. In fact, they were all identical and they were all powerful. Every part of their body was decorated and they were all effulgent. Every single one of them. Bhagavatam says they were each Vishnu Murtis. They were all surrounded by opulences. These opulences became personified. Brahma saw Kala, time, standing there and paying obeisances. Brahma saw Swabhava, one's own nature by association, standing there and paying obeisances. Brahma saw Samskar, which is reformation, standing there and paying obeisances. Brahma saw even material desire, Kama, standing and paying obeisances to Vishnu. And Brahma saw Karma, fruitive activities, and Gunas, the 3 modes of nature. They were all lined up and they were all paying obeisances to the Lord and the Vishnu Murtis. And in that way, Brahma saw the amazing manifestation of the Lord. And he realized that Krishna is beyond material speculation. He realized that Krishna is beyond material understanding. And when he looked all around in all the directions, suddenly all the Vishnu Murti forms vanished. They all vanished. And in all directions, where was Brahma? He found himself on the fields of Vrindavan, filled with the trees, the forests, which were always the livelihood of the inhabitants, and which was always pleasing in all seasons. Brahma thought, for one moment I was transported to the spiritual world. Next moment I'm in a different spiritual world. I'm in Vrindavan. And then he saw Krishna. And he saw Krishna seated there with all the cows, all the calves, and all the boys. The moment he saw this amazing scene, Bhagavatam tells us Brahma came down. When he came down from his swan, because he was on his swan, he hastily got down, took out, he said he has 4 heads, so he has 4 helmets, right? He took out all 4 helmets. Must be quite difficult whenever you have so many heads, so many helmets, so many alankar. But he took out 4 helmets, put it down, made sure the tips of all 4 crowns would touch the lotus feet of Krishna. And he bowed. He paid his obeisances. And he actually did Abhishek to Krishna with the tears that are coming out from his eyes. What an amazing, amazing point. So much tears came out from him. And then he rose gradually and he wiped his eyes and he began looking at Krishna. Only thing is, in that shloka, right, Krishna is not described as Krishna. Krishna is described as Mukunda. It is significant. Brahma, after he wiped his eyes, when he humbly looked at Krishna, he looked at Mukunda. Why Mukunda? Because Mukunda is the giver of liberation. By this wonderful pastime, Brahma had been liberated from his ignorance of the greatness of Krishna. That is why he calls him Mukunda. So every time you read the different names of Krishna in Bhagavatam, please pause, pull the brakes, and ask yourself why this name of Krishna is being put there. It is very significant. And that is why he is known as Mukunda. And then Brahma began offering his prayers. We don't have time for all the prayers of Brahma, but maybe 2-3 prayers we can understand. My humble suggestion to all of you is please study these prayers in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, because some of the most greatest prayers found in Bhagavatam are found here. And of all these prayers, Prabhupada actually quoted many of these prayers. They are very seminal prayers. The first prayer that Brahma chants, describes his mood, especially as he's reaching out to Krishna. In 10:14:3, he sings this very important prayer. Jnane prayasa mudapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukaritam bhavadiya vartam stane stita sutikatam tanovan manobir ye prayasho jita jito apitai strilokyam. The meaning is really nice. This prayer Brahma chanted because this prayer tells us how we can obtain the mercy and the sympathy of Krishna. And Brahma said that, my dear Krishna, even though we may all be established in our social positions, stane stitaha, doesn't matter. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never told anyone to leave their positions. Wherever you are now in Wellington, be in Wellington, stane stitaha. I'm in Singapore, be in Singapore. If you are a lawyer, doctor, engineer, it's okay, be where you are. But the important thing is, come out of the process of speculative knowledge. With your body and your mind and your words, offer all your obeisances and all your energy to the personality of Krishna and to his activities. Dedicate your life to hearing about Krishna, because these descriptions of Krishna, they are very powerful. If you live life that way, Brahma is saying, then you will definitely conquer Krishna, because otherwise Krishna is known as Ajita. He cannot be conquered, but he can be conquered by a devotee. So this is the first prayer that's very important for us, that if we want the mercy of Krishna, we should become fixed firmly in devotional service. The second point that Brahma brings up is the verse after. It's also a very important point he's bringing up. Please remember, Brahma is singing these prayers because he's feeling repentant and remorseful. But his prayers are actually for us also, because this is how we approach Krishna. In the second prayer, he sings very beautifully, Shreya Shrishtim Bhakti Mudasyate Vibho Klishyanti Kevala Bodha Labhyate Tesham Shaukle Eva Shishyate Nanyadhyatastu Latu Savagatinam. And now Brahmaji establishes what is the most important way to become self-realized. He says, Krishna, devotional service unto you, that is the best path for self-realization. If anyone gives up this path and engages in speculative knowledge, he will go through very troublesome process and he cannot achieve the desired results. It is like a person, who's beating a empty husk. The grain is out of the husk. What's the point of beating it? It has no value. Therefore, we should be very cautious not to go here and there, but always be with Krishna. Sometimes, there are so many other things. Whenever we have trouble, we always turn to this and that, and we think maybe I can solve something here. Some people say, maybe my time is not right. I remember my Guru Maharaj had a disciple. He never obeyed my Guru Maharaj's instruction. And one day my Guru Maharaj asked him, why is it? Sometimes my Guru Maharaj said, I don't know who is the Guru and who's disciple. I'm always asking you to obey me, giving you good advice. Why you don't follow? And you know what the disciple said? He said, Maharaj, I went to an astrologer and I checked and he said, your time is not good. That's why you'll never obey Guru Maharaj. So we find so many different ways not to do bhakti, not to follow instructions. But Brahmaji says all that is speculative knowledge. It'll become more troublesome. So don't do that. The third prayer that's very nice that Brahma gives, and you all know this, Tatte nukampam sushamikshamano bunjana evadma kritam vipakam ridvagva purvir vidadan namaste jivetayo mukti padasedaya bhav. What a beautiful, beautiful verse. This is the verse that actually gives us the mood of a pure devotee. A pure devotee is one who earnestly and patiently waits for Krishna's mercy to come. And while he's waiting, he doesn't blame anyone for his difficulty. What Brahma is indirectly saying, Krishna, I cannot blame anyone for my bewilderment. I can only blame myself because I brought this on myself. I forgot your greatness. So instead of blaming everyone, because in this world, the moment something doesn't go right, our tendency is we blame someone. Oh, Prabhu didn't give me the date of the thing, or actually, Prabhu missed something, or Mataji said something. That's why I'm feeling I don't want to come for the program. The mind finds so many reasons not to do devotional service. But the pure devotee, when he's in difficulty, he says, actually, the reason why I'm suffering is because of my past misdeeds. Why blame others? You slept on your bed, you should make it, isn't it? You make your bed, you can sleep on it. Why should we blame others? And instead of wasting time blaming others, he just uses his mind, his body, and his words to increase the quality of his devotional service. That is what we should do in challenging times. Increase the quality of bhakti. And we should help each other. Because at every junction of our life where there's a difficulty, that is the time to increase the quality of our bhakti. Not to decrease it, Prabhus and Matajis, but to increase it. Brahma increased the quality of his bhakti because he was in difficulty. And that is why for those who do that, the kingdom of God is always open to them. And I want to say something here, because for this particular verse, Sridhar Swami, one of our acharyas, he gives a very nice point on this verse. He says this verse tells us that actually we are all rightful heirs to the kingdom of God. And all we have to do is stay alive in devotional service. Just stay alive. My Guru Maharaj said, Devaki, just keep your head above water until you die. That's all. Just keep it up. Keep it yourself in devotional service. That's it. Because whatever that Father wants to give, he will only give to his sons and daughters, right? You're all the sons and daughters of Krishna. Why become moros in devotional service? This is a very important point for us to remember. And the last point, the last prayer I think I want to end with, Brahma finally feels, that how will I repent now? Krishna must be really angry with me for me doing this. So he says one last thing, which is very sweet, In 10, 14, 12 of Bhagavatam, he says, Ukshepanam garbhagatasya padayo kim kalpate maturadoksha jekase kim asti nasti vyapadesha bhushitam tavasti kukshe kiyad api anantaha. This is very nice. He says he calls Krishna Adokshaja. Adokshaja means one who is transcendental. That is the exact meaning there given in the word to word. Krishna is transcendental. He's beyond all of this. He's Adokshaja. But he says something nice. He says when the child is in the womb of the mother and the child is kicking, and mothers, when the child is kicking, does the mother take offense? How dare you kick me? Now I have to discipline you. Mother doesn't do that. In fact, very often I know that when mothers feel the kicks of the children, actually they feel some pleasure because they know the child is reacting actually. It's when the children are quiet, we become scared, isn't it? Even when children are at home, when they're very mischievous running around, they're okay. But I don't know about you, but when they become quiet, something very dangerous is going to happen. So that is Brahma's mood, Brahma is saying that I made a mistake, but I am within your womb. No one is outside of your womb. So please don't take offense if sometimes I do something funny. You please, as a kind father, as a kind mother, nothing is outside of you. Please forgive me. And when Brahma did all that, Krishna naturally, he forgave Brahma. Brahma repented. He became remorseful. And Bhagavatam tells us that when we are genuinely repentant, we can see Krishna. Krishna is perceived in repentance. And so Brahma took permission to leave. And when he took permission to leave, the boys and the calves, they were all delivered. They came back out of their sleep. But the beauty is Krishna arranged it in such a way, when the boys and the calves woke up, they woke up just where they had left off, their lunchtime. They turned to Krishna and said, Krishna, hardly a minute has gone. You came back so quickly. And Krishna, of course, did not want to tell them what happened. But Krishna just smiled and said, yeah, they just came back, And so Krishna said, my friends, why don't we sit down and why don't we have a very nice festival of lunch? And so they sat. And so they ate and they became very happy. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai Grantaraj Bhagavad Gita. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki. Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gurudev ki. Jai Gaura Premanande.
Hari Hari Bo.
Thank you,
Thank
Amrish Maharaj Prabhu. Sorry, I took a little more time.
No, that was wonderful. It was free flowing and it was just so pleasing to our ears and to our hearts. So thank you very much for a wonderful narration of this pastime, as well as these wonderful prayers that you have shared with us and the insights. It was really, really good. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. And let us see if anyone has any questions. And I hope you can spend some more time answering some questions, Prabhuji.
Yes,
okay.
I can. If there's anything, I'll be happy.
Yes. So if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hands. So there is one question from Pundarikaksha Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Go ahead,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna Prabhuji. Pranam Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Such a nice lecture. It actually my heart is really enjoying with ecstasy, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. You just showed that first time very nicely to us. So, Prabhuji, my small question is about the way that you mentioned that within the congregation, unless we see Krishna, so we will not be able to be happy. But within this material world, we always have some attachment, some selfish desires. Now, even though we know that it is selfish desire, but still it will be coming into the mind. Yes. How to come out of that, Prabhuji?
Yeah, that's a good point, Prabhu. Selfish desires are considered in Bhagavatam and Shastras as anarthas. In other words, they are unwanted habits. But as you said correctly, Prabhu, we have been in material conditioning for millions of lives. Naturally, desires, are very powerful. And very often, self-preservation is the law of nature, Prabhupada writes in his purports. So when you use the word selfish desire, generally speaking, unless we are really careful, we tend to look out for ourselves, we tend to look out for family, and that's a very natural thing in this material world. But Bhagavatam requests us to do one thing, that this process of coming to the point where we try to put Krishna in the center more and more is like a journey, Prabhu. It is a spectrum. It cannot happen overnight. It is a process that needs development. And the best way to finally come to a point where we do not put ourselves ahead of others is actually to make sure that the quality of our devotional service increases. The more we study Bhagavatam, the more we spend time with Prabhupada's books, the more we understand these things very carefully, and the more our mind and our intelligence is applied to these things, you will find that the process itself, without separate endeavor, will reduce the selfish desires in our heart. We may not need to make so much separate endeavor. We can be more alert about it. We can take association from devotees who inspire us because we see they are free of these desires more than we are. And when we take that kind of sadhu sangha and we are prepared to learn from them, we'll make advancement very quickly, Prabhu. So the short answer is, Bhagavatam's declaration is that all material desires will go with the increase in the quality of our bhakti and right-minded association and like-minded association of devotees. Why have you all gathered together? Because you feel naturally attracted to the members of this congregation. We can't force you to sit with someone whom you don't feel comfortable with. That, Rupa Goswami says, is like-minded association. So if you take that like-minded association well, and through that association, you serve the devotees, that service to devotees will reduce our selfish desires. I hope that is helpful, Pundarik Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Are there any other questions for Prabhuji? Nritya Gopal Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you very much for the wonderful class. Prabhuji, you mentioned about social intercourse in a congregation. Are you able to elaborate with some examples about what you mean by social intercourse?
The line that Kunti Mata speaks about is Bhautikanam cha bhavanam. It's the last line of a shloka. She says that the dissensions amongst the living entities are because of social intercourse. That's a nice statement that she makes. Social intercourse means that we come into a congregation, but what happens is we actually value socializing, material baggages. Perhaps what happened was, we were socializing on a Saturday or a Sunday somewhere else, but somehow Krishna consciousness has attracted us. So we feel that, it's nice for us to bring the children into a nice atmosphere. We also have a nice atmosphere. Then when we come for that, we realize then there are families, and then families means, we have a gathering. The only difference now is the gathering has a stamp, that says it's a religious gathering. But if we look at our activities closely, it could actually be an excuse for social gatherings. So what happens is that, in the name of Krishna consciousness, subtly, if we are not careful, we'll gather together. Okay, for formality, we'll hear Bhagavatam class. But the moment Bhagavatam class finishes, we're talking about everything else except that Bhagavatam class. That's normally the test, After Bhagavatam, if you sit down for prasad, actually now we can't, but if you sit down for prasad, you'll find that if you talk about history, geography, and politics and weather, it gives you an inclination of where we are actually with our consciousness. Sometimes people, I remember in Singapore, there was this boy who came and he was very enthusiastic. And then one day, he asked me, Prabhu, is there some nice girl I can find here for marriage? So I said, yeah, there are some nice girls. He said, actually, that's the reason I came. At least he was honest, He said, in my lifetime, I was spending a lot of time in bars and clubs, but my father was telling me to settle down. So those ladies, I can't settle down. If I want to find a girl, go to a temple. So I came to temple. Of course, Krishna is there. I like your movement and all, but I want to find someone. So you won't believe it, but there was a girl on that side who had a similar intention. And somehow by Krishna's arrangement, they met, and by Krishna's arrangement, they got married. And after marriage, we never saw them again. We never saw them again. We called them, we did everything. And they say, it's got nothing to do with you. Krishna was very kind, he fulfilled my desire, Haribol. And that was it. Right. So it's a crude example, but you get the feeling, you get the idea. Don't bring the material baggage into a spiritual setting, disguise it, and then say, no, this is spiritual. That won't work, because Krishna is supreme absolute truth. We cannot cheat Krishna. Eventually, it will become exposed. We will become disturbed. I hope that's useful, Prabhu.
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I have an extension of this question and answer which are going on, an extension question. Prabhuji, I think for the first question, you answered that individually what we can do so that we can actually focus on Krishna. And you also explained now how that desire is there. Everyone has that desire. But as a congregation, is there something special or different that we can do to make sure that we all can remain focused on Krishna and not actually get deviated to this social gathering kind of a scenario? Because over a period of time, maybe it can happen that in the beginning, everyone is enthusiastic and they are focused on Krishna. But over a period of time, that the enthusiasm may a little bit die down and it may become a social gathering. So is there something that we can do as a congregation so that we can remain focused on Krishna?
Nice question, Prabhu. I think the most important thing that we'll have to do is actually establish firm and loving relationship, transparent and open with each other. And it has to come from the leaders. And I think you all are doing that. I mean, you won't admit it, but I think you're doing that. If the leadership establishes a culture where we nip politics and material tendencies in the bud very quickly, then we don't allow the weeds to grow. But for that to happen, you are only able to talk to someone and tell someone, Prabhu, Mataji, this is not the way for us to grow, if you have a relationship as a platform. If there's no loving relationship, who will hear who? If we are loving with each other and we speak, people will know that there is no motive in our heart to cut you down, but rather to make you grow. So that adhikar to speak to each other openly in Vaishnava etiquette is actually the platform of loving, open relationship. And if we develop that culture of having that openness with each other, having ishtagoshtis, I find that helps in pockets and groups, to sit down, understand the challenges families have, to understand how families relate with each other. Sometimes Matajis have their own programs, Prabhus have their own programs. And then within there also, there may be some issues. To know the nuances of that, that is very important. The other thing I find is very helpful, Prabhu, is what we call the read and relish programs, where we all sit, read and relish Prabhupada's books as often as we can. When we gather that way and just put Prabhupada in the center, then no matter what we feel or what we have, the power and potency of Prabhupada will reduce all these tendencies from coming. This we have found to be very helpful in Singapore. So everywhere where there are pockets and groups, right, we have what we call the R&R program, the Read and Relish program. So every day, anywhere in Singapore, groups of 5, 6 devotees come together. They may be reading Bhagavad Gita, they may be reading Bhagavatam, they take down notes, and they continue with it, and they have sharing sessions. So that's very helpful also. So that's the other thing that's helpful. The other point that's also important is service. I find generally most of our challenges happen when devotees are serving in a congregation, especially festivals. I don't know how it is there, but when festivals come, right, somewhere the tempers go up, the blood pressure goes up. Someone will say, this is my service, he came and took my service. Most of the times we feel we own the service. When you tell them, Prabhu, you think others can be involved? We feel, oh, you're taking service away from me. So I always find Janmashtami, Radhashtami, when we used to congregate, that's the point, where I will request the leaders, please be extra tolerant, extra patient, be ready to offer dandavats. But sometimes we have to be firm also to make devotees understand what is the spirit in which we should do these things. So these are some things I can share with you, Prabhu, from the top of my head, actually, that may be helpful.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I think they were really, really helpful points. And many of them were eye-openers, and I'll try to implement some of them. Hare Krishna.
The other last thing, Prabhu, before I go on to the point is, sometimes in congregations, you have different gurus, disciples, and that is also a touch point that can be very sensitive. What we do in Singapore is we have 19 gurus, disciples in our congregation. So we have 19 Vyas Pujas through the year, right? So what happens is practically every month there is a Vyas Puja. So what we have here is that every Vyas Puja, everybody is part of the Vyas Puja. And the Vyas Puja is conducted publicly. It's conducted in our center, because then everyone feels like they're part of the family.
Yes.
And everyone gets to cook for another Guru Maharaj, because they are also our Siksha Gurus. And a Guru Maharaj's lecture is shown so that everybody who's everybody else also gets to hear from others. And we always put Prabhupada in the center of all that. That helps. Otherwise, the Guru issue can become a major issue. Yeah, not the Guru's fault. It's the fault of us, as immature disciples. Yeah, just wanted to share that also.
Yeah, this is also a very important point. Thank you, Prabhuji, for that insights. Hare Krishna. There is one more question which has like Sudhanua Prabhu or Sudharma Mataji. One of them has a question. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Thanks for a very beautiful, inciting lecture. The question I got is, you said about devotee, as devotee don't blame anyone for one's bewilderment. So increase the quality of bhakti. So I think for me at least, I feel like whenever there is something not going right, I try to blame others rather than taking the blame on myself. So
you're good company, Mataji. We all face that challenge,
So it's really hard. Though we try, like our intelligence says, but the mind actually comes in between and says, no, that's not the right, So how we can overcome it, or practically any tips you can give, Prabhuji?
One tip I wanted to ask you concerns the dynamics between both of you. Because what I find very helpful is if one of you feels this way and shares it with the other, and the other person reminds the person of Bhagavatam, and you listen to him, of course, then everything will be fine. That is one good way, practical way of coming out of it, that we reveal our mind. You see, Brahmā revealed his mind. He revealed his heart to Krishna. And in Bhagavatam, Mataji, the whole of Bhagavatam is about devotees revealing their frailties and their weaknesses to those whom they trust and they love, and telling them that this is my situation. And then being prepared to be submissive to hear someone reiterating what Bhagavatam has stated. Parikshit Maharaj could easily have blamed Shringi Brahmana. He could have blamed, Shamika Rishi. He could have said the proportion, the punishment is not proportionate to what I did. And it's true, even Prabhupada writes that. But Parikshit Maharaj decided that Krishna has come so kindly in the form of a Brahmana's curse, because he knows that if he did not do this, I will continue to be a king and forget Krishna. Sudama could easily have told that Krishna did not even want to ask me what I wanted. And he just let me go without even asking. And I walk all the way from Porbandar to Dwarka, which which you can do will be a crazy thing because it's far. But he never asked that. As he left, he said, the reason why I am in difficulty or I'm not getting anything from Krishna is because Krishna knows that if I do get wealth, I will forget him. So it's really about the changing of a lens, Mataji. It's about the changing of an attitude. If we see a problem and a devotee appears to be the immediate cause of the problem, what we should do is do what the cow and the bull did when Kali came to beat them. Because when Parikshit Maharaj turned to them and said, identify the perpetrator, they refused to. They looked at each other and started saying, who actually is the perpetrator? Who is the remote cause of all these things? So you see, cow and bull gave each other association at that point of time. That sadhu sangha between cow and bull helped both of them, Mataji. So we have to help each other. If I feel this way, voice it to someone whom you trust. If not, voice it to Krishna, like Brahma did. Take up Bhagavatam and read and convince your mind that yes, someone may have done this. Agree, they should not have done that. Now, what are you going to do about it? You can't. Even if you hang upside down for 30,000 years, it's not going to change. It's happened already. We can't do anything. But if we understand who is the remote of the remote cause of this, what is Krishna trying to teach me here? That's very important. Sometimes it's how we ask the question. Little Saraswati was given by Prabhupada a small deity of Krishna, right? And then he took it away to play with her. And everybody asked Saraswati, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? And she was really worried. And then one devotee changed that question and said, who has Krishna? And then Saraswati turned to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada has Krishna. So sometimes we may ask, why is he doing this to me? Why is he doing this to me? Why is she doing this to me? Maybe the question should be, why is this happening to me? What should I learn from this? What does Krishna want me to learn? That will suddenly bring a lot of peace in your heart, Mataji. I hope that's useful.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Very nicely explained. Thank you.
Very wonderful answer, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, there are two more questions. The devotees have raised hand. You still are okay with time, Prabhuji?
I'm okay.
Answer them? Okay, fine. Sannivas, Prabhuji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Pranam. It's a very, very, very inspiring and enlightening class today. Prabhuji, you're doing a professional job, and on top of that, you're having such a nice memory of all these Bhagavad Gita slokas, Bhagavatam slokas, and everything. How to balance this all while you working? Normally, I heard so much of like this from who are brahmacharis or who are dedicated their life in reading so much. Can you tell us some tips, or can you also enlighten us how to balance work life?
I can share with you very quickly, Prabhu. The first most important thing we should know is that Krishna is time. Time is Krishna. Therefore, if we use time for Krishna, Krishna has this ability to save time for us. That's a very important thing. When we don't use time for Krishna, then we will lose time. So the trick, Prabhu, for all of us actually, I'm getting an echo. Is everything okay? Can you hear me? Okay. The real challenge for us is to squeeze time for Krishna and prioritize time for him. We have to put aside time as priority, and that time must translate into appointment with Krishna. Just like you have dentist appointment, doctor's appointment, we don't miss it because we consider it important. how much important it should be then to have our appointment daily with Krishna. That appointment should be the first thing. Anything before, nothing else should be ahead of our appointment with Krishna. If someone is most important, isn't it logical that we would give that appointment to the person who's most important? So starting the day with a nice time set aside for Krishna doesn't have to be much, Prabhu, but it has to be filled with quality. Why I say it doesn't have to be much is because Krishna is time. Krishna is also Yogeshwar. He's the master of mystic powers. If you put aside time for Krishna, Krishna will put aside more time for you, Prabhu. He will give so much quality and depth to what you can study in 15 minutes with your heart, right? As compared to what you don't want to do, but you just stretch your time for 1 hour and in between you try to remember Krishna. So quality time is really what Krishna wants. So when you look at your life, each one of us, when we examine our lives, you will really realize that actually there's a lot of time that we have that we don't use well. You put them all together and you realize, my God, it comes to about 1.5 to 2 hours a day. But if you take all that and squeeze time for Krishna, you'll find it really works. So for example, if I'm in between court, right, I've already studied the verse in the morning. I spend a whole day remembering the verse, remembering the purport. I have a notebook. So if I'm in between court and I have to wait, I remember my shlokas. I read a little bit of Bhagavatam. Today, we are so lucky. We have Vedabase on our laptops everywhere, on a phone. So it's not difficult for us to be in touch with Krishna if we want to. But it all comes down to Ichcha. How much do we want to do it? The more we want to, Prabhu, the more Krishna will give. And my experience is, it doesn't matter that you are on paper busy. I say on paper because Krishna is time. Radhanath Maharaj said something very nice. He said, the most busiest devotees who are engaged in Krishna consciousness are the ones who has the most time actually. It sounds contradictory, but it's not. Because the more you give time for Krishna, the more Krishna gives you time. I hope that is helpful, Prabhu.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
That was a very inspiring answer for me as well, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. And there is one more question from Kirtivanta, Prabhu.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranams.
Dandavat.
Prabhuji, I've heard so much about you from Nitragwal Prabhuji, and it was such a pleasure to actually hear you live for the first time today. Thank you very much for the class. Prabhuji, you've made some very good points regarding social interactions and social intercourse and things like that. My question is regarding, when you have a group of devotees and you're trying to build a relationship and you're trying to get close to them and things like that, before you open up, because our ego is very strong, there's always a fear of judgment. And usually when we have a fear of something, it is because we are doing it ourselves. So we are judging others. So we fear that when we open up, that we might be judged and things like that. How to get over that sort of fear?
That's a very good point. I think that fear is helpful sometimes, Kirtivan Prabhu, because sometimes you also have situations where we actually don't have a good, deep relationship with a devotee. And at that point of time, when you reveal your mind, for whatever reason, sometimes you will sense that the devotee treats you differently after that, may not, be very nice to you. And that's like a warning point sometimes from Krishna as the super soul. But what will happen is that you'll always be able to find devotees who inspire you, and whom you can turn to and have even a siksha relationship. It could be a peer relationship, or it could be a siksha relationship where you see this devotee is very confidential, very careful, very neutral. I can reveal my heart and my mind to him. And if you really want to do that and you pray hard to Krishna, my experience is Krishna always reveals such a devotee to you, Prabhu. But they will be far and few. It's not that the other devotees are not good, but how do we put it? The finer devotional service becomes, the more confidential it also becomes. I'm sure you all would find that true. Many confidential things that we cannot just speak plainly become very important in our devotional service. So you may not be able to find many devotees whom you can relate to, but even one or two is enough, Prabhu. But don't don't ignore the voice that tells you, to be conservative about how you open your heart, because it's Kali Yuga. It's not the fault of other devotees sometimes, but sometimes Kali Yuga is so powerful. Even if we don't want to do something, we do it anyway, and then we regret. I mean, all of us have been in that situation. But having said that, Kirtivan Prabhu, the concept of compassion is very important. That concept balances these feelings of hurt that sometimes we feel from devotees. Devotees don't really want to hurt us, but they are also harassed by the modes of material nature. When you have time, look at 11.7.37 of Bhagavatam, Prabhu. 11.7.37 of Bhagavatam. If I'm not wrong, that's the one that says, it's the example of Mother Earth. There it is very nicely stated that when we are harassed by other people or other living entities, we actually should understand that they are also harassed by others. That's an important point. Amrish Prabhu, have I got the verse right? Is it 11.7.37?
Yes, Prabhuji. Exactly.
It is, right?
11.7.37. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. So it's a very important concept for us to understand. It makes it easier for us to relate to devotees. When devotees cause us trouble, we should understand this point. They are also harassed by the modes of nature. So a devotee who is following the path of devotional service should not become unduly disturbed. If we understand and are compassionate why they are suffering and they are in difficulty and why they are also doing that to us, it becomes easier to handle it, you see. I hope that's useful, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Kirtivanta Prabhuji is elder brother of Nitya Gopal Prabhuji.
Really? I had no idea.
Prabhuji, elder in the material world, but definitely a lot younger in the spiritual sense.
No, you're very calm and very nice. Thank you, Prabhu. No wonder you both have the same accent, Sounds like you've been in New Zealand for a long, long time.
Yeah. Are there any further questions for Prabhuji? No. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. That was a very wonderful class, and especially the question answers were very insightful and very inspirational. I'm thinking that even 1% of the conviction and faith that you have in Srimad Bhagavatam, if I can get, I can become a much better devotee. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for coming and inspiring all of us. It was really helpful. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you again very soon. Please find some more time.
Thank you.
For all of us.
Amrish Maharaj and Prabhu and Mataji, and to all of you, I'm seeing you now, I have not had the opportunity to meet you, but our meeting today is not accident. Our meeting today is arrangement. And I'll end by saying something. When Nanda Maharaj and Vasudev met, after Krishna had left, they said something very nice. They said, our meeting today is like rebirth. It is like being born again and given another opportunity at life. So this is how we should feel on the basis of Bhagavatam. There is a reason why we met each other today, and we should take back all that we can learn from Bhagavatam and Krishna. Thank you so much for your sadhu sangha. I wish you all the best in your spiritual life, and Krishna willing, we will meet again. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much.
You have a wonderful congregation. From your answers, from your questions, and from your mood, it's so nice. I'm feeling very enlivened. Hare Krishna.
His Grace Devakinandan Prabhuji ki
Jai. Ananta Kodi Vaishnavinda ki. Hare Krishna.